My favorite Metallica song.
I tried to mix it up a little bit.
You know? I really wish we had kind of the rap stuff going with Run DMC in that as well.
Ah, you know what? We should have had Stephanie.
Yeah.
Right? We should have done it when Stephanie was on.
Yeah. So Leonard, you're muted on Clubhouse, so no one's hearing you.
Yeah.
Look at you with the iPad. Way to go, Marc. That's awesome.
Game changer.
That is a game changer. Welcome, everybody, to our special AgTech edition of IoT Coffee Talk.
Whoop, whoop.
Today, we have our very special guest, Dan Maycock of Loftus Ranches. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Dan. And people are telling me there's horrible echo, so make sure everybody's got their headphones on and turn down your iPhones.
Yep. So Dan Maycock, principal at Loftus Labs and Loftus Ranches. We're a recent AgTech startup formed from a 100-year-old hop farm. So Loftus Ranches is on its fourth generation. CEO is Pat Smith. Interesting opportunity. Pat and I, getting to know each other over the last couple of years, realized there was a real need in agriculture to provide data consulting services. He is not only a farmer, but he also had a master's degree in analytics from NYU. So had two other classmates that wanted to hop on board. The four of us got this going in November. So Loftus Labs is the data consulting company, which is attached to Loftus Ranches, which is a 100-year-old hop farm. We also do about, I think it's about 2,500 acres of hops and 500 acres of apples. And so we're about as ag-techy as it gets, which is a lot of fun. Especially when it comes to the ag space, you kind of got to know a lot of domain knowledge, know what you're talking about, but also bring to bear all the intricacies of data engineering, ETL, BI, data warehousing, machine learning, AI, all that kind of stuff.
I never thought I'd hear like ETL and agriculture in the same sentence.
I know, right? It's a foreign concept for a lot of people.
Does everyone in our audience know what ETL stands for?
It's actually ELT now.
Oh, there you had to do with the ELT
Extract,
crap.
load, and transform.
ETL is dead.
Or ETL, yeah.
Don't listen to him, folks. ETL is not dead. I just did it yesterday.
No, it's not.
Extract, load, and transform.
I poured a little bit of ETL in my coffee yesterday, and it was fabulous.
There you go.
Wait a minute. Is it
extract, transform,
and load? Right. Yeah.
But now the new thing is extract, load, and transform. The reason why it was ETL was performance issues. Now it's ELT because performance isn't a thing anymore.
Is that kind of like BLT?
Exactly.
It's like BLT.
Yeah.
But it's also, for those of you Microsoft-y people, if you ever worked with SQL Server and you did SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services, that's what ETL is.
Yep.
You kind of drag and drop. You point one thing to one data source, and then another here, and then you're going to move it over, and you might massage the data or transform it while it's flying in through the air.
Never going to go away.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how I originally created. Does anyone remember MEAP, Mobile Enterprise Application Platform?
Yes.
It was a Gartner thing.
So
and,
there's MCAPs, there was MEAPs, and there was Mobile Consumer Application Platforms, MCAPs. There was
MACD.
Yeah. So MEAPs, I helped pitch and sell MEAPs. I was so famous around MEAPs, I was actually quoted in Wikipedia as a reference on the MEAP page because I had a paper about the fastest way to get data into your enterprise.
You made it big time if you're on Wikipedia, dude.
I know. And it was the advent of low code. That was like the first low code, no code wave to roll through because everyone had to get their apps quickly on the App Store. Everyone was tired of the web wrappers. And so MEAPs became a thing. And that was kind of, I think, the advent of low code, which now you got Power Apps, a bunch of other stuff.
True.
But the desire for mobile apps on the App Store with your logo on it outpaced the number of people that knew Cocoa.
So today we're somehow going to tie together like IoT and data and analytics and agriculture and smash all that together into a big mashup and figure out how it makes sense, and why should people care.
That's right.
So Dan, how can, just at a high level, what does agriculture need? What are the needs today? What do we have to, I know we got a lot of big challenges that farmers are facing and growers are facing. We got an exploding population of people to feed. What are the big challenges?
Yeah, it's diminished arable land too. So not only do we have to grow more for more people, but we have to do it on less land, regardless of the causes of climate change, which is more the debate. No one's debating that the climate is changing. We're seeing it on the front lines in agriculture with metrics like growing degree days and adverse weather conditions, that sort of thing. So where we see issues in agriculture, it really comes down to getting information into the hands of folks in agribusiness, not just farmers on the planting side, but a whole supply chain, being able to have information more readily available to them. A big way to do that is obviously what we call ground truth, the information coming from the ground itself. There's things we're never going to measure. The fun fact is that microbial health of the soil. I know, microbes, right? You have more microbes in a foot of soil than you do people and population in the world. So
that's crazy talk.
I know.
There's more microbes in like 1 foot.
Totally insane.
Yeah, 1 foot of soil, more microbes in a foot of soil than people in the earth.
And so you're saying the composition, the health, the whatever of these microbes has a huge impact on farming?
Yeah, there's tens of thousands of types of microbes in every foot, let alone just 1 foot, but you go 3 or 4 or 5 feet down, and then you try to figure that out for 3,500, 10,000, 15,000 acres.
Yeah.
That's a key part in soil health, and you can't ever measure that because there's just too much. So, even in deep learning scenarios, we need billions of observations, just being able to measure and track all that, because every inch of soil is going to have a different microbial makeup. So you kind of got a black box there. You're never going to figure that out. There's other things like weather. You can do your hardest to try to predict it. But when you have an annual growing cycle, you have adverse weather conditions. For example, in the spring, if it gets too hot too fast in March, then trees will start to bloom, but then you could have a freezing event, an Arctic cold front. Things get cold, that could damage a crop, and that will affect you several months later in harvest, right? So it's not so much trying to predict and control everything like a greenhouse would. Hydroponics, indoor growing, those are all concepts people are trying to figure out, but you can't grow 3,500 acres of apples in a greenhouse, right? So the option is, I just need data to react faster. I need to be proactive as much as I can. I need better forecasting, yield predictions, getting smarter about these types of things. If there is a frost event, how do we use technology to react to that faster?
Yeah.
And it's all aiding the decision makers, right? No one's going to get smarter about that land than a fourth generation farmer, incredibly smart people. But the more information I can feed, that's the inputs, right? The farmer is the computer in that case, and all these different inputs coming from IoT devices better inform those decisions. There's a lot of interesting technology out there, but the real impact is where yield either improves and I make more money, or my costs go down because I'm smarter about packing and chemicals and labor and that sort of thing. So I bring all those elements together in a way that's consumable, which is the other part. No farmer wants to blow money on a giant war room with a bunch of screens and gadgets and charts and, like you have in Fortune 500 companies in some places, right? You got to have something where I'm out in the field and I have a mobile phone and it prioritizes the top 2 or 3 things I need to focus on. And that tells me that day what I need to deal with based on all the other inputs and everything else going on. And that real only benefit for IoT is as it can inform a decision and help create information faster, then I'm not reacting a week later or a month later, right? Labor tracking is a great example. A lot of labor focuses around something called piece rates. I pay people by piece, but I also have a minimum wage, and I have to balance for a given day what my wages are at, what my piece rates are at, and I calibrate that.
So is a piece like I'm going to pay you per pound, or how many bushels whatever you pick, or bins full of apples?
Yeah. I mean, pruning branches, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So there's a lot of data and information that goes on around being as efficient as you can be around that whole space, right? If I have chemicals, if I blast an acre and I hit a bunch of weeds all at once, can I get smarter about using chemicals in a precise way and being more targeted? There's a lot of AgTech innovation out there around targeted agriculture. If I'm using water moisture sensors as an IoT device, at 3 inches, 8 inches, and 10 inches in my soil, those typically cost thousands of dollars. So how many of those do I need to cover a farm? Because if I have too much concentration, I'm wasting money. If we don't have enough, the data isn't as valid.
Yeah.
So it's not so much arguing the need for technology. It's the right application with the right information delivered in the right way to make it useful. And that's where we're seeing this advent of tech companies get on board and say, farming's cool. I want to get into farming. How hard could it really be, right? There's automated apple pickers out there.
Just shake the tree.
Exactly. Well, they do that. Almonds. It's actually
there's always a mechanical solution, right?
Yeah.
To all the digital problems.
The tree's been traumatized for years to come, though. Afterwards,
exactly. That's how they harvest almonds. Is they literally shake them to get them down. But a great example, I heard a story, and I don't know if this actually happened or not, but a gentleman from a tech company in California comes up to Washington to talk about apple picking. And the machine was optimized for, I think it was 11-foot rows, and the farmer had 10-foot rows. And the tech guy asked the farmer, well, how hard could it be to move the apples out? Because the machine was built the way it was. And there's a big divide between the tech community, the ag community, and part of what we're trying to do is bridge that a little bit, bring the groups together, right?
That scenario sounds just like all those poor people doing SAP implementations. And they said, well, can you customize SAP for our business? And they're like, the people in Waldorf are like, no.
Yeah.
999. We're not going to change it. You're going to bend to us. And so that's a perfect example there. We need we need you to move your apple trees.
Yeah. Because they was that much harder to re-engineer the entire machine at that point, right?
Right.
So having a clear area, there's groups like the 5G Open Innovation Lab that are bringing farmers and tech companies literally to the same plot of land to get them to work together. Public-private partnerships, right, where the government gets involved. There's another group called Emerging Prairie in the Midwest, focused on row crops, wheat, soy, sorghum, corn. I think it's the University of North Dakota or that does that, one of those Midwestern universities. Yeah. So a lot of initiatives right now to try to fix that gap, right? Be a Rosetta Stone where you can understand both sides, bring solutions together. But it's practical space. It's not a clear Venn diagram, and we're trying to, at Loftus Labs, we're trying to bring those circles closer together.
So IoT, we always talk about it. It's at its base level. It's measuring stuff, right? We're just taking a measurement. There's always, how do we do things today and how do we want to do things in the future? And today, to take measurements, someone gets in their pickup truck and is driving around in the rows of crops out in the orchards, whatever, and they're directly looking or taking measurements. And you're right, maybe they can get weather reports, but they might struggle to get microclimate stuff. And so, IoT is like kind of the beginning for whether it's farming or a factory or whatever. It's like I went from visiting something and finding out its current state and health and performance and blah, 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 to now a sensor is figuring that for me. And with the power of wireless or some kind of communication, it's sending that back to me. And now I can see it where I'm sitting at my desk or whatever. And then, of course, the next step after that is let's go beyond me seeing it and making decisions, and let's see if we can start applying analytics to it and let the analytics make decisions instead of a person looking at a report. Creating
that sixth sense, because a lot of farmers, especially in the...
That's a great name for a IoT startup company, Sixth Sense.
There you go.
I like that. And the tagline is, I see dead people.
Yeah. Well, it should be, I see dead crops.
I see dead crops.
Yeah. But you know, when you think about it, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to at the end of the day, take all this data and then codify it in a way that kind of simulates the sixth sense that a farmer has. And when you look at the wine industry, some of these folks who are very sensitive to the microclimates, the terroir, every element of the science of raising grapes and viticulture, it's amazing the amount of information these folks process in their brain, you know, and the sensitivities that they have to information that it would just be incredibly complex to, number one, capture through IoT sensors and, you know, the creation of a network and the aggregation of the data into a pile of information that then needs to be interpreted. I mean, you think about that complexity and all that effort that would need to be put into place to simulate that sixth sense, you know? And I think that that's one of the big challenges with IoT is that you're really, at the moment, for the most part, we're only dealing with the fringe of what these people do. As we get closer to this really differentiated sixth sense that they have, and I think a lot of this applies to industrial as well, right?
Yeah, it does.
Because, you know, that dude that gets paid $10,000 an hour because he's the only person in the world that knows that one critical asset in the factory floor, and the way that he determines what's wrong with the asset, he takes a wrench and hits it
you're right.
I think listens to it, it's like, here's what's wrong, you know?
There's so much commonality.
Yeah, it's like crazy.
Well, the interesting thing about that, to your point around the manufacturing setting, is you have a situation where a machine's been there 20 years. There's documentation, there's warranty, there's that information gets lost in the fray.
Yeah.
The machine starts to vibrate. The person that's been there a long time knows if they hit it, that tones down the vibration because there's a caliper out of calibration, right? The technical definition, right, is different than, well, that's just what makes it. But then it actually starts to break down. Caliper loses its viscosity, starts to clog things up. Now you have a problem where the machine's going to go out of service. And because you're not doing predictive maintenance and you aren't really sure what's going on because that's just how it gets fixed, you end up having to replace the machine versus getting it on a warranty because the paperwork got lost somewhere. So you have a lot of complicated factors around the life of the machine, the situation, the technical definition, how it gets fixed, and even the more sophisticated manufacturing operations. That tribal knowledge has been a replacement for that technical information because over a generation, right, a lot of that gets lost. The interesting thing in agriculture is it's a lot closer to tie things together. We do have generational changes. I mean, Yakima started 1920s, a lot of the farming. You had a change.
Where is Yakima?
Yakima is in eastern Washington.
Oh, yeah.
Central Washington, actually, right in the center of the state. But you had a generational shift every 30 years. 20s started, then you had it in 50s, and then 80s, and then 2010s and 20s. So we're seeing folks in their 60s and 70s passing the torch to folks in their 30s. But it's not a strangers in the night type thing. It's folks growing up and learning the business, right? From an agronomic standpoint, being able to learn the land.
Yeah. So it's like we have a combination of sixth sense and kind of like the ghost or horse whisperer type thing here.
Yeah.
It's the farmer. I know how this all works. It's the guy in the factory. I know when the vibrations like this, it means this. And we're all trying to replace that tribal knowledge and those vibes or that feeling with technology so that we, you know, I over talk about this. It seems like every year, and obviously things are a lot weirder these days, but in Seattle on the evening news, sometimes they would always do a piece about, you know, our biggest manufacturer up here in Seattle is Boeing. Actually, it's the largest manufacturer in America, even though they're suffering greatly right now. But they would always talk about the same thing. Oh no, we've got all these really old workers who know how to build aircraft at Boeing, and they're all about to retire, and we didn't have young people trained, and we got to figure out how to fill this gap because we're not going to know how to build airplanes anymore, and we told everybody to go to college to be something else instead of knowing how to be a machinist. And it's the same problem. We need to replace this know-how with technology. That's why you hear about people, I'm going to take a journeyman and put on, his little augmented reality, and it's going to be like playing, what was the game in DOS or whatever? It's like, go here, pick up key, look left, whatever.
Dork.
Yeah, bring your toolbox.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yes. And so we would guide the person too, I'm having a fly, we have to bring movies into this. So I remember, remember that movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis and everything? I remember there's a scene they're on that rock, that meteor or whatever, and they could not get that space shuttle to start up. But the Russian cosmonaut, is like, get out of the way, NASA person. This is how we do in Soviet space. And he's like taking the hammer and beating on the deal. And then all of a sudden the space shuttle turns on and they fly away. Yeah. That's what this whole discussion is about.
No, I'd say the only big difference is, with farmers, it's always going to be decision support. You're never going to totally replace them. But they not only have incredible knowledge around the land itself and that travel knowledge, but they went to school, they got an agronomic degree, they work with agronomists who are PhDs, post-PhDs in agronomy and farming specifics. They know every square inch of that land, but they also have an incredibly smart ability to just know all the aspects of farming. They're very scientific about this thing.
Yeah.
But because they're so good at that area, they're not going to also go out and get a data science degree and learn all about that area. I mean, Pat Smith at Loftus is a rare exemption where he went out and got that advanced degree in data analytics and also had a very deep sense of the land. But a lot of agronomists and soil scientists know everything you'd ever want to know about that particular area and the space and the domain. But that Venn diagram where you enter in all these new technologies, like now I need you to figure out embedded control systems and PLC controls or IoT devices, and that's a whole nother domain hitting them outside of the space they have a good deal of expertise in, right? And it's too much to ask someone to be an expert in two entirely separate areas. That I think is the biggest hindrance in agriculture is if I'm incredibly talented and smart and trained in these areas, I'm going to learn about areas that impact that, but I'm never going to be an IoT expert, an electrical engineer, and a data scientist, as well as being, a soil scientist, an agronomist, weather expert.
A lot of stuff to know.
Exactly.
I think we talk about this just in IoT in general, like when we say, why is it not taken off as much as we thought? It's the same problem. IoT is made up of so many different domains and expertise that it's hard to find one person, let alone 10 people who can do all the things you have to do to successfully build an IoT solution.
Yeah.
So one of our good friends on our coffee talk, David Vasquez, he's a Verizon guy, and he sent a message to us. He was really interested in knowing about the connectivity stuff. How do we connect you? So we're talking. We got to get sensors out on the farm, and we got to get that data back. But there's some magic thing that has to happen. What are the different solutions that farmers are looking at to get data from those sensors back to the farmhouse or the packing center or whatever?
Yeah, so there's a big push right now around connectivity. We see services like SpaceX launching Starlink, which is a low-flying satellite. They want to put 66,000 some satellites in the sky at an area where it's very low latency bandwidth. I think it's like less than 5 milliseconds in a perfect world. They're rolling it out. They're focusing on agriculture. It's a huge use case for that service. You have LoRaWAN, which I'm not sure what LoRa stands for, but it's a typical frequency of choice for farmers to set up their own wireless network, similar to a mesh network.
Long range.
Long range. Yeah.
Using that technology, CBRS, which is a community band.
Citizens band, Breaker 19.
There you go.
Radio.
So, CBRS is being used in a lot of farming applications. I mean, the granddaddy of them all. You get this 5G, which 5G is just a marketing term, but 600 megahertz frequency cellular connections, right?
Just take the dagger out of my heart right now, Dan.
Yeah, it's
5G is just a marketing term.
It represents a new wave in cellular connectivity, and so 5G as a term, right, really over 4G means it's going to go farther than 4G did, and that's the real benefit there is for a farmer if you have 5G towers, you'd be able to get more connectivity than you would because of the way the frequencies work. It's able to go a lot farther between towers.
So it's a new wave, like Flock of Seagulls new wave? Or Depeche Mode new wave?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. And I'm watching the technical specifics about that. So anyone feel free to jump in and save me here. But the real benefit to that technology is that areas that were dead, might not be anymore. And there's still a hard case to be made to get cellular connectivity out in the far-flung reaches of places like Eastern Washington, because usually towers are just along freeways and roads and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, there are dead spots in places like Mattawa and Eastern Washington that have zero connectivity, and it's a safety thing. So if I'm a farmhand that hurts myself, I can't call 911 because I'm 20 minutes from a cell signal. So even in areas like that today, it's still a problem.
That's such an important thing you bring up there, because we do talk about how out in the country, rural farms and ranches, and the lack of coverage, and that being a problem because you can't do this IoT stuff and you can't do all the data analytics if you don't have coverage. But you bring up a good point about safety. And I remember, if anybody, you don't even have to go onto a farm or ranch. I've been to national parks, you've been skiing places. I've been all kinds of places where all of a sudden my phone just says no signal. And there's such a safety issue. I don't know. Does anybody remember a million years ago, like when you were driving down the highway and they used to have the phone, the little phone box every mile or so? And I know they still have them in Europe. I remember when I was driving around France, they outsourced their highways to this company called Da Vinci, and they have these boxes where you can call every kilometer. We used to have that. I just noticed we don't have that anymore, it seems like. And I can imagine, you think you're okay, you're in a bad situation, you're a car wreck, you're hurt, and there's no signal. Nobody can come save you.
Well, there's an interesting story I read about landlines are actually, I think it was copper shielded against EMPs. So if there was ever calamity, a solar flare, nuclear fallout, anything, an EMP hits, landlines are protected, but cell towers are not.
Does everybody know what an EMP is?
Electromagnetic pulse.
Pulse. So it actually wipes out electronics, and it doesn't just come from bombs. It comes from lots of things, extraterrestrial activities from the sun. Those types aliens can cause aliens. But just the EMPs themselves. So a lot of things we considered setting up infrastructure, it's not in place anymore. Call boxes, payphones. So it has become a safety issue in the course of business. And so some farms have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to set all that up for themselves. And it doesn't scale out that way. So, with things like 5G becoming a bigger deal where we can get more connectivity, helps out a lot of ways. And that's part of what I've been helping with, rural broadband initiatives, FCC, the state of Washington, looking to fund a lot of that activity. Similar to electricity, I don't know if you guys know about rural electric associations or REAs, but electricity was invented in the 1880s, and it wasn't until I think it was the 40s or 50s the REA was formed because the federal government realized power companies did not want to electrify rural America. So the government had to step in, create an agency called REA, and get all the electricity out to farms. And if it wasn't for them, there'd probably be still people without, electricity at all.
And so this is the same problem we face today with cell towers.
Yeah.
It's not, financially attractive to build cell towers and have backhaul networks in places where there's only a handful of people.
Right. So Dan, you were mentioning LoRa. I think we have somebody who knows LoRa pretty well.
There you go.
But I think it'd be great if Marc could share some of the stuff that they're doing in Europe, right? Because I think when you look at the United States, we have particular issues when it comes to connectivity. A lot of things, 90% of our landmass is rural, whereas when you look at other geographies, it's much less than that. So I think there's innovations that are probably happening in Europe that may even be applicable and differentiated in terms of their value in the United States. So, Marc, you want to take an opportunity to? I mean, we had Vinky on a couple of weeks ago. Give us a little bit of insight into what's happening on the connectivity front.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I have tons of questions actually, because I work on several agriculture projects. So I remember, for example, speaking with some coffee farmers from Ecuador, that they were like, yeah, fifth, sixth generation as well of farmers. And they were like, yeah, but we know if it rained or if it didn't rain. So why do we need a rain meter here to know if it rained? Because we already know, no? Or why do we need a temperature sensor if we already know that the temperature just doing it like this? So yeah, sometimes it's complicated to say, hey, your skills are gonna be swapped by this machine. And we will get even better data than you expect or you think you have. So sometimes it's really tricky, but
we always like to talk about augmenting the decision and not replacing it, and that I think is a key point, because you never want to create.
What can you augment, actually? I mean, it's tricky because, for example, on these high-quality coffee farmers, these guys, were at the maximum of production. They didn't use any chemicals. So it was like very artisanal, and on the other hand, I work on another project of mushroom warehouses where they were growing mushrooms. Yeah, that's another story, because that's about productivity, and they are very interested on having machines to have the production more efficient.
Yeah, the augmentation, I think, is that a farmer is going to have a certain tool. I mean, the Farmer's Almanac is the oldest form of data analytics in the world, right? And so farmers have been users of data for such a long time. Weather reports, my first job at the age of 13 in the 90s was helping sell computers to farmers and wheat. To be able to download via Usenet weather reports, right? And so they're always consumers of information and consumers of data, right? And they always have been, as much as data as information is available. But improving the quality of that information, improving the readiness of that, improving the real-time nature of that information is just replacing information they previously consumed, whether they're taking in nature, writing a report, but being able to improve the quality and ready availability of that information, that I think is the augmentation. They're still the decision maker at the end of the day, but if they get higher quality inputs and higher quality data, just like a machine learning algorithm, improve the quality of the data, you get a better outcome. And that's, I think, in this case, as all these IoT devices get more sophisticated, as long as you're not producing more of it, the quality has to improve as well. And if anything, get less information that's more precise.
Yeah, I think it boils down to being able to scale the sensing and the information gathering, right? I think maybe that's really the core value. You give the farmer more data points. I think where it gets tricky is actually providing them some degree of predictive sense, right? Whether through predictive analysis. And Marc, I think you're spot on in saying, look, some of this stuff is just incremental in terms of its value. What's probably more important is, can you tell me 2 months ahead of time that Texas is going to freeze over for the first time, and ever probably since the Ice Age? That probably helps a little bit, and then it's not going to kill off all my cattle, destroy all my crops.
But even if it can be predicted, how can you avoid that? I mean, what can you do? Even let's imagine that
right.
You can tell to a ranch, hey, next week it's gonna be freezing, complete snow. Your cattle will die. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
There's lots of things. I mean, let's take that specific example, right? I can start filing the claim for insurance because I'm going to have to, cover the loss on that thing. There might be arrangements with banks to get land to move the cattle elsewhere. There's always more information I have, even if it's inevitable, it's going to happen. I'm going to be able to make better decisions than if it happens that day. And now I'm in reaction. I mean, any kind of proactivity as much as is possible. There's not, you're going to avoid it, but you're going to lessen the impact of it.
Yeah, well, with cattle, you can move the cattle, but with apples, with apple trees, that's tricky, right? Or with
Wood
I have
tree.
another question. No, I have another question. So how? No, it's just curiosity from my point of view. Maybe you'll know the answer, but how's Monsanto playing here? Is Monsanto playing a role on IoT or on agriculture
Yeah,
technology?
in a big way. I mean, they're focused on what they do, which is row crops, right? Seeds. They're a seed company. That's what they primarily drive. They bought a company called Climate Corp in 2013 for about $1 billion, who did a crop insurance analysis, machine learning, and weather. And now they roll out a product called FieldView, which is very popular, and that aggregates data from sensors across a given wheat field and other places, puts that onto a kind of an overlay, what we call a satellite view or overlay of the farm, and let you farmers know information around yields, information around growing, information on spraying and stuff like that. I don't know, not as much in the row crop space, don't know as much about it, but that is the big platform out there that Monsanto is putting a lot of money into farm intelligence. And that ties
John
to
Deere
IoT.
is doing something specific for agriculture.
So John Deere actually has a lot of sensors on their machines, right? Quite a bit. Combines, everything else. They have sensors. I mean, they're with Monsanto definitely doing a heck of a lot around AgTech, incorporated into their platforms and their tools to give farmers more intelligence there, but only in the areas they play in. And that's the tricky thing is Washington State has 300 commodity types, right? Types of crops. Those guys are only going to play in certain areas, right? Row crops mostly. Big farms, Midwest, that sort of thing. We've got a lot of wheat and potatoes and stuff here in Eastern Washington. Well, not potatoes, but wheat and whatnot. So, they're not going to. John Deere does not have a machine for apple picking, for example, right? It's just not big enough for them to get the economies of scale. So they are doing a lot in the areas they're in, and there's certainly John Deere tractors available for specialty crops, but they're not going to do the kind of whole hog ag tech innovations they're doing in other areas where you buy one machine for hundreds of thousands of acres versus a more complicated machine for 3,000 acres.
Yeah, you know what? I want to give a real quick shout out to Kevin Bowers, who's out in the audience right now. I almost said outhouse, clubhouse audience. And he sent me an article. Outhouse.
That's our new copycat spin-off startup to take on Clubhouse. Outhouse.
Yeah, maybe that's where we take a lot of the conversations about getting rich quick. Throw that into the outhouse. Yeah. So anyways, he sent me this article. It's about John Deere. It's funny that you guys bring this up. It says basically it's asserting that farming is just outdoor manufacturing. I don't think I could disagree more. I think there's so much more nuance to it and dynamism that you probably don't encounter in manufacturing.
That was a big word.
Yeah, I know. It's a new buzzword. But here's the thing. Everything that I'm hearing right now is just incremental improvements over the status quo in terms of the form of and the mode of agriculture. Are you guys seeing anything in terms of the actual innovation in agriculture where we're structurally looking at the practice of agriculture and changing the paradigm? So whether it's like urban farming, taking IoT technologies and other technologies and enabling new forms of, agriculture. Because a lot of what we're looking at right now and what it seems that the industry is just incrementally improving what we already do.
Yeah,
and then the net benefit, quite honestly, is going to be it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as you throw more technology at it and you throw more money into the infrastructure. It's like marginal benefit as you continue to try to squeeze efficiency out of the status quo rather than maybe doing it a better way.
Well, there is a First, I'll talk about the manufacturing example. If you do indoor growing, there's certainly a case where you can control all the variables associated to what you're growing, right? Cruciferous, urban farming, hydroponics, those types of things are definitely very innovative and moving, but you're not going to necessarily get, like I said, 3,500 acres of apple trees indoors. So there's too many outdoor variables that you can't control for microbial content, soil, things like that. You can do lean farming. There's books around lean farming and using lean manufacturing principles, but it breaks down at some point. It's not as quote unquote predictable as you would manufacture an airplane. There are some types of farming that are that way. And there's arguments to be made around things like shipping apples all over the U.S. Most of an apple's water. And so when you're shipping apples, you're mostly shipping water. And, the same is true for a lot of different produce, where if you could grow it locally, you're cutting down on the supply chain issues. That being said, you can't grow apples in every region all over the U.S. So, apples grow where they grow for a reason. So it's a tricky thing to be able to create more localized produce and localized food options, while at the same time just being realistic about how you grow things to scale and make things commercially viable. But the incremental improvement would only be true if everything was staying the same. And that's why I bring up climate change, is that things that may have been true for the last 100 years, right, around macroeconomics, around tariffs, around trade, around the environment, around ecology, around sustainability, around carbon, right, carbon capture. A lot of those age-old, 100-year-old assumptions are changing. The world's changing. Regardless of the, we're not going to point fingers at why, because it's, being debated around the causes and duration and how bad it's going to be. But it is, right? We're running into water shortages in California. Aquifers are drying up. So it's not so much, hey, we're getting a marginal improvement because everything's in stasis, right? Where we have some control here. The control used to be the environment, used to be the ground, used to be the weather. There was predictability and there are patterns, right? And over the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're seeing those things going to continue to change. So the importance of technology and IoT to create more truth, that ground truth, that information, is to be able to calibrate against those changes. Because as things become more less unpredictable, as things change, as constants no longer are constant anymore, we still got to grow food. Still got to feed the world, right? And so we now have to have technology come into play to help just get more information around the changes, around the assumptions. You can no longer assume. Automating things are getting more precise around chemicals and water, because costs are going up in an area like labor. Costs are going up around water because there's less of it. Being smart about how water gets used, right, versus just blasting it out over a period of time, because there's more water than you know what to do with. Water used to be a constant in a lot of places, right? But if you go to Southern California, they have to get a lot smarter about water now. So the marginal improvement, I think, would be true in a kind of a closed environment where I can control for certain things. But in large scale farming, we're going to see a lot more Midwestern floods taking out entire, swaths of wheat. What crop insurance paying out things for wildfires and everything else, right? In California, all those fires in California kills the wine grapes in Napa, right? Grapes are incredibly susceptible to smoke. Those things are just going to build on each other over time as we see more changes happen in the environment. And that's exactly where IoT can come in and play a part, just to create more information and insights proactively or in near real time, so farmers can make better decisions, because we are in a changing world.
Yeah. Well, maybe IBM made the right decision in buying the weather company.
Yeah, could be.
Hey, Marc, you had a question?
Sure, yeah. A couple of more questions. Sorry, I had too many questions, and Rob and you were talking all the time, so I didn't. Just kidding.
Ouch.
So how do you see vertical farming?
So
is this like a future solution to feed all the world, or it's just another type of farming?
No,
or can you apply like techniques from the real, from the normal agriculture to vertical farming? What do you think?
I mean, the infrastructure costs are much higher, so getting commercial farming operation that can scale, the economics. I think it's definitely higher priced in some ways, depending on how you're going to do vertical farming. You have to control for the electricity. You got to pay for the infrastructure. You got to pay for the building, right? A lot of more things have to get paid for than just growing it in the soil out back on a farm. So I don't know if the economic support to the scale we would need to feed everyone. But if we were able to spread it out enough and enough people are growing enough things, you're also limited by what you can grow. You don't see a vertical tree farm. You see cruciferous, you see lettuce, you see spinach, right? There's a big push around cricket protein right now, and Impossible Foods being able to find alternative protein sources. Crickets are amazing. You can grow millions of those in a very small space, and the light doesn't even have to be on, right?
I just threw up in my mouth.
Yeah. And that's the case. A lot of people do, but I've actually had a cricket protein. It's a powder, and it came from a Shark Tank episode, and tastes like peanut buttery type stuff, and didn't even notice it.
Remember that scene in Snowpiercer when they found out that all the nice food the people in the front of the train were eating were made by like roaches or crickets or something?
All those protein bars.
That was so disgusting.
Yeah.
But I think it's great that you're doing it. Yeah, that's great, y'all.
I tried it out.
The sausage that you ate yesterday, Rob, they were made based on cricket protein or not? The sausage that I saw on Instagram.
It's from real animals.
How do you certify that? You have a blockchain where you have all the evidence? Yes,
I had the hot dog blockchain that verifies this is legit. Yes.
So talking about blockchain, some weeks ago I was speaking with the IoT people. If you don't know IoT, it's like a database baked by blockchain database. How do you see this space? I'm sure that you have seen a lot of startups coming with blockchain solutions for agriculture.
Yeah, food safety obviously is what IBM has, a food safety blockchain. There's a couple other companies pushing blockchain for food safety. Honestly, food safety is not enough of a concern by enough people. I mean, people aren't actively tampering with food all the time. It's just not a thing. Our food system, our supply chain, incredibly robust, incredibly safe. It doesn't get messed with by a lot of people, right? And so when I'm a farmer looking to invest a lot of money in something where I'm not seeing the imminent problem, there's already so many controls in place to control the quality of food. I mean, occasionally you have spinach leak out and cause an E. coli issue, but that's compared, like an airplane, compared to the amount of food that's shipped and delivered nationally every day versus the issues we have in the system, right? We hear about it in the news and we freak out. We think, well, how safe is my food? Or COVID hits. People didn't go hungry in large part for COVID. I mean, there's disruptions and we didn't have the toilet paper, but thinking about what our system had to do to bend and flex to keep everyone fed, it's incredible, right? But there's so many controls in place. And as a former CIO of a packing house for apples, I could tell you there are tons of controls in place around food safety and quality, right? It's a huge deal already that you have something like blockchain. Is it solving a problem that really exists? Is it trying to make it better? A lot of people are questioning in the ag space, what problem do we have that this is really going to go out and try to solve, right?
Right.
And there is going to be a need for it, and there's going to be a way to incrementally improve something that's already there. But it's not such a broad sweeping problem as to say, holy buckets, if we don't know blockchain, this is going to happen to everyone. Because food is safe, food is stable, food is being delivered. There are startups trying to look to make it better around perishability. And not so much food safety, but trying to ensure that food gets there faster. There's a statistic I saw where 70% of the food grown ends up being thrown out before it's in someone's house because of spoilage, because of perishable goods, because people buy with their eyes, right? Yeah. So there's companies like Ugly Food trying to take ugly food and feed people with it. But blockchain isn't necessarily going to help perishability so much. It's just around security and enforceability. So it's a unique technology and starting to get some traction in ag. But when it comes to things like food safety or solving that particular problem, I think it's an incremental improvement of both and not a whole-scale revolution because there's already so much in place that's working.
Cool.
All right. Should we wrap up?
Yeah, let's wrap up and then, go on to Clubhouse and let some folks ask questions.
Sure.
All right.
All right. So, hey, thanks for joining us in this week's episode. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you. Very informative. And follow us at www.iotcoffeetalk.com. Below or sideways or
subscribe.
I don't know where
click subscribe.
Click subscribe. Like us.
Yeah.
Like us on TikTok.
And then we will see you next week. So thank you and
all right.
Be safe.
We're out.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.